The city wasn't awake yet. At 5 in the morning, New York was suspended between dreams and duty, the streets damp with last night's rain, the air still holding its breath. The only sound inside Monroe Tower was the soft squeak of a mop and the low hum of fluorescent lights. Noah Hale moved through the lobby like a shadow that belonged there. His uniform was neat but worn. The navy fabric faded at the elbows, the ID badge scratched where his name had once been printed clearly. He didn't mind. The quiet suited him. As he wiped the last glass panel of the revolving door, dawn slipped through in thin streaks of gold. He stood there for a second looking out at the empty street, the kind of stillness only people who work the night shift ever get to see. Then he checked his watch, 5:03 a.m. He placed his cleaning rags neatly back into the cart, locked the storage closet, and lifted the worn guitar case resting against the wall. The black canvas had lost its color years ago, but the handle still fit perfectly in his hand. He whispered to no one, "Let's go make someone smile." Outside, the early wind nipped at his coat as he crossed 2 blocks toward St. Mary's Children's Hospital. The place always smelled faintly of disinfectant and rain. He'd started stopping there almost by accident months ago after finishing his shift. He'd seen a little girl sitting by the fountain, her face pale and eyes too old for her age. Her mother had been crying quietly beside her. He didn't ask questions. He just sat on the curb and played. Now it had become his ritual. He stood near the entrance under the awning where the light flickered and tuned his guitar by ear. A few strings buzzed stubborn from the cold. Then, with a deep breath, he began to play. The melody wasn't anything famous. It was a piece he'd written years ago for his wife before the cancer, before the long nights of silence. It was gentle like morning light on an empty kitchen table. Across the courtyard, a small figure in a red beanie lifted her head. Emma. She always sat in the same spot, wrapped in a hospital blanket, a little plastic bracelet peeking from her wrist. Her mother, Rachel, was there too, her eyes tired but grateful. Noah nodded to her. She nodded back. When he finished the song, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small envelope marked for Emma, and slipped it into the cardboard cup beside his feet. It wasn't much, just a few dollar bills from the extra hours he'd worked last week. He whispered, "For the brave girl who keeps showing up." The hospital door opened and a nurse poked her head out. "She smiled this time, Mr. Hale," she said softly. Noah looked up, a quiet warmth spreading across his face. "Did she?" "She did. Even asked when you'll play again." He chuckled, strumming a final chord. "Tomorrow, same time." As he packed up, the first streaks of sunrise painted the glass facade of Monroe Tower a block away. To anyone else, it was just another skyscraper. To Noah, it was the place that paid for Lily's school lunches and their small apartment in Queens. By the time he reached home, the city was waking. Car horns, steam vents, coffee carts. He unlocked the door to a tiny 2-bedroom apartment where a little voice immediately called out, "Daddy." Lily ran to him, her curls bouncing still in her pajamas with cartoon stars. Noah crouched down and caught her mid-leap, holding her like something sacred. Morning sunshine. Did the girl in the red hat smile today? He smiled back. She did. Took her 3 songs, though. Lily giggled. Maybe tomorrow it'll only take 1. Maybe. He tapped her nose with his finger. Now go brush those teeth or they'll stage a protest. As she scampered away, Noah leaned against the kitchen counter. The apartment was small but warm, filled with hand-drawn pictures on the fridge and a shelf of second-hand books. On the windowsill sat a framed photo of his late wife Anna holding a baby Lily. The edges of the frame were chipped from being moved too many times. He whispered, "We're doing okay, Annie. We really are." Across town, Clara Monroe's car glided to a stop in front of the same hospital. The driver, a man who'd worked for her family for years, turned slightly. "Miss Monroe, we're early for your meeting." Clara didn't answer at first. She was staring out the window, eyes fixed on a man standing under the awning with a guitar. His back was to her shoulders, straight but unguarded, as if music had somehow kept the cold from touching him. The melody floated through the cracked window low, intimate and haunting. Something about it unsettled her. She had heard this tune before, years ago, at a charity event her late husband had organized. It was the same rhythm he'd hummed while writing his last letter to her. Clara blinked hard, shook the thought away. Coincidence. But when the man turned slightly, she caught a glimpse of his face, lined but kind, a quiet steadiness in his eyes, the kind of man who did not play for attention. Her driver cleared his throat. "Should I drive on?" Ma'am Clara hesitated. "No. Wait." They watched as the man placed an envelope in a cup marked for Emma. He didn't count. The money didn't look around for applause. Then he packed up his guitar and walked away, the rising sun catching on his shoulder like a spotlight that no one else noticed. Clara's driver said quietly, "He's here most mornings, ma'am. Some of the nurses say he works night shifts at Monroe Tower." Clara's gaze lingered on the empty spot where he'd stood. "Does he?" "Yes, ma'am. Janitorial department." She leaned back, lost in thought. Strange world, isn't it? Some people build towers, others clean them, and sometimes the ones cleaning know more about grace than the ones at the top. The driver didn't reply. That night, Noah clocked in again at Monroe Tower. The building was silent except for the whisper of the vacuum cleaner. His guitar rested beside the janitor's cart, safely zipped away. As he wiped fingerprints off the glass doors of the executive floor, the city glittered behind him, distant, unreachable. He didn't see the faint reflection of a woman watching him from her office across the hall, the same woman who'd sat in that car that morning. Clara Monroe. She stood in the doorway holding a file she'd forgotten to sign, but she didn't move. Something about the rhythm of his movements, the precision, the quiet care reminded her of the song. When Noah finished, he turned startled to find her there. "Oh, sorry, ma'am," he said quickly, lowering his gaze. "Didn't mean to be in the way." Clara hesitated. "You're the janitor." "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes flicked to the guitar case by his cart. "Do you play?" He smiled faintly. "Only when there's something worth playing for." Their eyes met for a heartbeat before she nodded and walked away, heels clicking against the marble, each step echoing louder than the last. When the elevator doors closed behind her, Noah looked at his reflection in the polished glass. He couldn't explain it, but something about that brief encounter felt like the first note of a song he hadn't written yet. And somewhere between the silence of the marble floors and the hum of the city below, a story had quietly begun. The doors of Monroe Holdings opened with a soft, pneumatic sigh, welcoming the world in like it belonged there. Polished floors gleamed like mirrors reflecting the endless climb of glass and steel above. The air inside was chilled and faintly citrus-scented, calculated calm in every molecule. Clara Monroe walked in like she owned the building, because she did. Her heels clicked with a rhythm of quiet authority as she passed the security desk, not bothering to glance up. Everyone recognized her. CEO, heir, the one who turned a floundering legacy business into a billion-dollar tech-backed philanthropic empire. Her expression was unreadable, sculpted in years of corporate wars and boardroom betrayals. But this morning, something tugged at her. Not panic, not guilt, something quieter, like a memory she couldn't name. At the edge of the lobby, a janitor knelt polishing the bottom pane of the main revolving door. He worked with quiet focus, moving the cloth in precise circles, pausing only to squint at the streak of early sunlight beginning to break through the glass. The cart beside him blocked part of her path to the private elevator. Clara slowed barely and said curtly, "Do you mind?" The man looked up, startled. His eyes were warm, unguarded. "Sorry, ma'am," he said, calmly moving the cart with practiced ease. She froze for a split second. That voice. She didn't respond, just stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 41st floor. As the doors began to close, she glanced at him again, but he was already bent back to work. That voice. It lingered in her chest like a chord unresolved. On the 41st floor, the glass conference room was already half full with her executive team. Clara stepped in nodding at the assistant who handed her the latest board report. Her hair was still damp from the morning shower, tucked neatly behind one ear, and a barely there shade of lipstick framed a face far too composed for someone who hadn't slept in days. Daniel Kincaid, head of finance, stood near the whiteboard. "We need to talk about the Children's Arts Fund," he began without ceremony. Clara raised a brow. "Talk about it or kill it." Daniel cleared his throat. "The optics are great, Clara. I won't deny that. But the numbers don't justify another year of funding. The board's pushing for tighter returns. We're a tech-driven foundation now, not a music school. It's a fund for underprivileged kids," Clara said, her voice flat. "It was my husband's legacy." Silence. "We know," Daniel said gently, "but optics can't carry dead weight forever. We need to evolve." She looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows. From up here, the city looked unreal, like a toy set. Detached, small. Her mind drifted to that guitar, that man, that melody that had slipped past her armor. "Table it," she said finally. "We're not discussing this today." But her gaze cut sharp. Not today. Clara didn't stay for the post-meeting chatter. Instead, she slipped out through the side corridor, bypassed her executive suite, and took the elevator down alone. She didn't know where she was going until the car stopped on the ground floor. The janitor was gone. She stepped out into the street, the morning bustle rising around her like white noise. Her driver raised a hand from where he stood by the open car door, but she waved him off. "I'll walk," she said. 10 minutes later, Clara stood across from the children's hospital. Her coat flared slightly in the wind hair brushing against her cheek. And there he was. Again. The same man, the janitor, sitting on the same low wall outside the hospital gate with that same battered guitar across his lap. He played slowly. No rush, no show, just presence. On the bench not far from him sat a little girl wrapped in a knitted red beanie, her knees pulled up under her chin. Next to her was a woman, perhaps her mother, leaning gently against her, both of them lost in the music. Clara remained still, as if stepping closer might break something fragile. The song wasn't familiar, but it felt like it should be. Simple. Pure. A kind of quiet bravery in melody form, like someone holding your hand in the dark without saying a word. When he finished, the girl in the red hat raised her eyes and smiled, just the smallest curve of her lips. Clara saw the man reach into his coat pocket and pull out a plain white envelope. He placed it into a small cardboard cup at his feet. Written in black pen were the words, "For Emma." He didn't wait for thanks, didn't look around. Just nodded once to the woman and gently packed his guitar away. Clara watched as he stood and turned. He didn't notice her across the street, but she saw him clearly, saw a man who gave not because he had excess, but because he understood absence. A nurse came out the front doors of the hospital and caught Clara watching. "He's here almost every morning," the nurse said with a small smile. "Plays for Emma, never asks for a dime." Clara turned to her. "Emma." The nurse nodded toward the girl in the red beanie. "Leukemia. Waiting on a donor match. It's been a long few months." And him Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Don't know much. Works nights somewhere, I think. But the music helps. For all of us." Clara looked back toward the man who was already disappearing down the block guitar slung over his shoulder, his pace unhurried. He didn't walk like someone trying to be noticed. He walked like someone trying not to be erased. Back in the car, Clara sat in silence. The city moved around her in layers of steel and glass and noise, but her mind was quiet, too quiet. She thought of the conference room, the numbers, the board's demands. And then she thought of the little girl's smile, that barely there miracle of a moment. Her driver adjusted the mirror. "Everything all right, Ms. Monroe?" She didn't answer at first. Then, softly, almost to herself, "Tell me, what do you think happens when the quietest person in the building turns out to have the loudest heart?" He gave a gentle shrug. "I suppose. Someone finally listens." Clara looked out the window once more. The melody lingered in her chest like a question waiting to be answered. The first real cold of November had arrived, sharp, insistent, and honest. The kind that cut through coats and excuses alike. Noah Hale tightened his jacket as he walked toward St. Mary's, his guitar case bumping softly against his leg. He'd almost skipped that morning. The night shift had been brutal, and his hands still ached from scrubbing marble floors until they gleamed. But he couldn't shake the image of the little girl in the red beanie, the way she listened not to the melody, but to something beneath it. When he reached the hospital gate, the bench was empty. For a moment, panic fluttered in his chest. Then he saw them coming, Emma and her mother, Rachel. Rachel moved carefully, one arm around her daughter's shoulders, the other clutching a paper cup of hospital coffee. "Morning," Miss Rachel Noah greeted, setting his guitar down. Rachel smiled, weary but kind. "Morning, Mr. Hale. You didn't have to come today. It's freezing. Music doesn't mind the cold," he said simply. Then, crouching to meet Emma's gaze, he added, "How are you doing?" "Red beanie." Emma gave a small shrug. Her cheeks were pale eyes heavy from medication, but there was a flicker of mischief in them. She pointed to his guitar. He grinned. "That's a yes." "Huh." Rachel chuckled softly. She doesn't talk much anymore. The treatments tire her out. But when you play, she listens. Noah nodded and began to strum. The sound filled the quiet courtyard, weaving through the hum of hospital generators and passing cars. He played slow, the kind of tune that didn't rush to be beautiful. Halfway through, Emma leaned her head on her mother's arm and whispered something Noah couldn't hear. Rachel's eyes glistened. When the song ended, Rachel said quietly, "They're still waiting for a donor match. Doctor says she needs the transplant soon." Noah hesitated. "And the cost?" Rachel looked down. "Insurance covers part of it. But I had to quit my job to be with her. We're trying." He felt the words hit somewhere deep. He'd been there once, watching bills pile up like storm clouds while pretending to his daughter that everything was fine. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded envelope, and slipped it into the cardboard cup by his feet. "For Emma," he said. Rachel blinked. "Mr. Hale, you don't have to." He shook his head gently. "I want to." Then he picked up his guitar and started another song. This one wasn't for the hospital, or for Emma, or for Rachel. It was for the quiet ache of being helpless and the small stubborn grace of showing up anyway. Later that afternoon, Clara Monroe stood in her corner office, the city stretching endlessly below. On her desk lay a stack of reports, financial forecasts, donor reviews, project terminations. But her attention was elsewhere. She had left a meeting early and walked without telling anyone back to St. Mary's. She hadn't meant to. She'd told herself it was curiosity, not conscience. But something about that man, that music, had unsettled her in ways she couldn't quantify. When she arrived, he was already there, surrounded by the soft hush of morning drizzle. The little girl in the red beanie was curled against her mother, listening. Clara had stayed hidden behind her car door, heart-pounding for reasons she didn't understand. And when the rain started coming down harder, he didn't stop playing, not even when his fingers turned red from cold. She had watched him until the last note faded. Then she'd driven back to her tower of glass in silence. Now she couldn't focus. Her phone buzzed. It was a reminder for the quarterly budget meeting, the same one where the board would finalize the decision to cut the Children's Arts Fund. Clara stared at the screen for a long moment, then shut the phone off entirely. That evening, Noah sat in the staff lounge of Monroe Tower, sipping from a paper cup of instant coffee. His coworker Terry, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes, plopped into the chair across from him. "You ever take a break, man?" Terry asked. "You look like you're in a commercial for exhaustion." Noah smiled faintly. "Just long nights. You know how it is." Terry tilted his head. "Heard you've been out there playing guitar for some kid." Word got around. "People talk too much," Noah said, but there was no irritation in his tone. "She's sick, right?" "Yeah, kid's tough, though." Terry shook his head. "You're a good man, Noah. Most people wouldn't bother." Noah looked down at his calloused hands. Maybe, but sometimes it's not about being good. It's about remembering you still can be. A week later, the hospital courtyard was empty again. The rain came in sheets drenching the steps. Most people stayed inside, but Noah didn't. He stood under the awning guitar and hand water dripping from his sleeves. The cold bit into his fingers, but he played anyway. He didn't know that a black sedan had stopped across the street. Inside, Clara watched through the rain-blurred windshield. Her driver offered her an umbrella, but she shook her head. She wanted to see him like this, unfiltered, unguarded. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to be noble. He was just there. A man keeping a promise no one asked him to make. For a long time, Clara didn't move. Rain soaked through her coat, and yet she couldn't tear her eyes away. She thought of her own past, of the years she'd spent building walls so high that no one could ever reach her again. After her husband died, she'd stopped listening to music altogether. It had hurt too much. But now, this quiet act of kindness on a forgotten street corner. It was more powerful than any speech she'd ever given. When Noah finished playing, he bent down, took another envelope from his coat, and placed it in the cup, heavier than the last. Then he stood up and walked away, disappearing into the misty gray morning. Clara remained still, water running down her face, her breath fogging the car window. And for the first time in years, she whispered not to anyone in particular. "Thank you." The next day, a nurse at St. Mary's found an unfamiliar envelope in the donation box near the entrance. There was no name on it, no signature, just a single word written in graceful, steady handwriting for Emma, and inside a personal check for $10,000. It had been one of those mornings when Clara Monroe needed to disappear just for a few minutes, just from a few people. The glass conference room had been stifling with its numbers and buzzwords. Return on mission, strategic optics, growth markets. Every syllable felt like a nail being tapped into her ribs. She'd nodded in all the right places, offered sharp, efficient responses, but inside her thoughts had drifted to something quieter, warmer, a melody, one that refused to leave her mind. Instead of taking the elevator back to her office, Clara climbed, past the executive suites, past the maintenance floors, up to the rooftop. The door creaked open, and the city greeted her with its wide-armed skyline stretching in every direction like glass mountains. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faintest scent of steel and wind. But she wasn't alone. Across the rooftop, by the edge of the glass ledge, someone knelt with a squeegee and a bucket of suds moving in slow, deliberate motions. He wore the navy uniform of the janitorial crew. His back was to her, but his voice floated on the breeze, low, unpolished, humming a tune that instantly tugged at her chest. It was him, the man from the hospital, the guitar player, the janitor. Clara froze. Noah turned, sensing movement. For a split second, their eyes met. He blinked, surprised, but didn't straighten up, just offered a small, respectful nod. "Didn't expect anyone up here," he said, standing and wiping his hands on a towel. "I could say the same," Claire replied, instinctively composed. "I needed air." "Best place for it," he said simply. There was no recognition in his tone, not of her title, not of her face, just acknowledgement. That alone caught her off guard. She looked around, unsure what to do with her hands. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It hummed almost like a pause in a song. "I brought coffee," she said suddenly, holding out the extra cup she hadn't realized she'd been carrying since the lobby. He hesitated. "Thanks." He took it gently, like it might break. "Don't think we've met. I'm Noah." She didn't offer her last name. "Clara." "Nice to meet you, Clara," he said, like she wasn't one of the most recognizable CEOs in the city. They stood in silence again, watching the buildings blink to life as morning light sharpened the edges of the skyline. "Were you humming?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "Bad habit. I don't even realize I'm doing it. It was familiar." He gave a shy shrug. "Old piece. One I used to play a lot." Professionally, he looked down at the cup. "Used to. A long time ago." She waited. My wife loved music. He said finally, his voice gentler now. She played piano. I played guitar. We did a few small gigs back in the day, weddings, coffee shops, once at a jazz lounge that had no idea what to do with a folk duo. Clara smiled despite herself. After she passed, I stopped playing for a while, he continued. Then one day my daughter asked why the guitar was dusty. I didn't have a good answer. Clara said nothing. She could feel his honesty settle around them like the wind, unforced, unguarded. I've seen you, she said quietly. Outside St. Mary's. He nodded slowly. I figured someone from the building would recognize me eventually. You play for the girl, Emma? Yeah. Why? He looked at her now, eyes clear. Because sometimes when you've lost more than you thought you could survive, the only thing that makes sense is to ease someone else's pain. Clara felt something in her chest twist. She swallowed. I left something in that donation cup, she said. A few days ago. He raised a brow. You, the anonymous check. She shook her head. Not that one. He smiled faintly. Well, then thank you. Emma's mother probably cried for 20 minutes after reading that note. Clara felt her throat tighten. I didn't write a note. Now it was his turn to be surprised. You just left money. Quietly. She nodded. He studied her for a moment. You don't seem like someone who does anything quietly. Clara let out a breath of a laugh. You'd be right. The wind blew a strand of hair across her face. She didn't brush it away. Instead, she looked at him again, truly looked. There's something about your music, she admitted. It's been stuck in my head for days. Not just the notes, the feeling, like something I'd forgotten or tried to. He didn't answer, just listened. I haven't slept well in years, she continued, but the other night after hearing you play in the rain, I slept. For the first time since she didn't finish the sentence. He didn't ask her to. Instead, Noah looked out at the city and said softly, maybe that's what music is supposed to do. Not impress. Just return something you thought was gone. They stood side by side, the wind brushing against their coats, the world buzzing far below. I should get back, Clara said at last. Me too. Those windows won't clean themselves. She started walking toward the stairwell, then paused. Do you always work alone up here? Usually. I might come back tomorrow, she said, glancing over her shoulder. He nodded. Bring a coat. The wind has opinions. She smiled, one of the rare, unguarded ones. Then she disappeared through the door, her footsteps fading like the last notes of a melody that hadn't quite ended. Noah turned back to his bucket, but the song in his head had changed. For the first time in a long time, he started humming something new. The video was 47 seconds long, shot on a phone, shaky, grainy, the kind of thing that normally got buried under cat memes and dance challenges. But not this time. It started with a gentle strum, then a slow pan across a rainy courtyard outside St. Mary's Children's Hospital. A man in a soaked janitor's uniform sat hunched beneath an awning guitar, balanced on his knee water pooling at his feet. He played as if no one was watching. Only someone was. The camera zoomed slightly to reveal a little girl in a red beanie sitting nearby, pale, fragile, watching him like he was the only thing anchoring her to the moment. A caption in white font faded. In this janitor plays every morning for a girl he barely knows. He never asks for $1, just wants her to smile. Within 6 hours, the clip had hit 1 million views. By noon, someone had identified the man, Noah Hale, custodial staff, Monroe Holdings. And by 3:00 p.m., Janitor, with a heart, was trending nationwide. Inside the top floor of Monroe Tower, the mood was less heartwarming. Clara stood at the head of the long glass table, arms folded as the PR team flurried around her. We're losing control of the narrative, said Josh, the new digital strategist. Reddit's running with it. There's a whole thread about how our janitor is more humane than our executive team. Another voice chimed in from the corner. The media angle is spiraling. BuzzFeed's requesting a comment. So is the Post. They're calling it The Ballad of the Quiet Hero. Clara raised an eyebrow. That's a stretch. Doesn't matter, Josh said. The story is out. People are comparing his salary to yours. Someone even photoshopped a quote on your headshot that says, "I'd rather fire kindness than fund it." It's satire, but it's gaining traction. The head of HR, a stiff woman named Martha, flipped through a folder. Technically, he's in violation of 2 policies soliciting on company-adjacent property and using Monroe-branded uniform off hours for non-sanctioned representation. "You want me to fire him?" Clara asked flatly. There was a pause. "Well," Martha said carefully, with this kind of visibility, keeping him on could set a precedent. A younger executive piped up, face pale. "There's even a meme going around that says, 'The guy who scrubs our toilets just fixed our reputation.' It's getting tens of thousands of shares." Josh cleared his throat. "If I may, we could leverage this, bring him into a community campaign, maybe spin it into corporate goodwill. But it's risky. He's unpredictable." "He's a father," Clara said softly, more to herself than the room. "Sorry, nothing." She straightened. "Call a full department lead meeting. Now." 20 minutes later, the glass conference room buzzed with senior staff from finance, legal, PR, and operations. Clara stood at the head again, now calm, unreadable. She scanned the room slowly. "We've all seen the clip. We've all read the headlines. We've all heard the opinions she began. But what I haven't heard," her voice sharpened slightly, "is a single question about what it means." Silence. Daniel Kincaid from finance cleared his throat. "Clara, this could snowball into a liability. Emotional resonance or not, it puts us in a precarious position." "You mean it puts our image in a precarious position," Clara corrected. "Because what's actually happening is simple. A man gave his time, his music, and his heart to a child fighting for her life. And the world noticed." More silence. Martha spoke up. "Clara, if we allow this narrative to become the Monroe Holdings brand, we're stepping into territory that's messy, unregulated. People will expect that every janitor is a miracle worker, that every employee has a viral story. That's not scalable." Clara nodded slowly. Then she stepped away from the table and walked toward the window, looking down at the city. The same city Noah Hale walked through every morning. The same sidewalks where he played without applause, without agenda. She turned back, voice quiet but firm. "I'm not firing him. A beat. I'm not reprimanding him. I'm not issuing a warning. I'm not hiding him behind legal memos or risk assessments." She stepped closer to the table. "I'm not punishing him for being the kind of man this world desperately needs more of." Another pause. "Let me be perfectly clear," she said, locking eyes with every person at that table. "I do not fire kindness. I learn from it." Dead silence. Then Josh whispered under his breath, "Well, there goes the headline of the week." Clara ignored him. "I'll handle this personally," she said. Meeting adjourned. Later that night, Noah stood in the break room holding a mug of lukewarm coffee. His phone buzzed with message after message, some from people he hadn't spoken to in years, others from strangers. One simply said, "You gave me hope today." He rubbed a hand over his face, still unsure how the video had even surfaced. He hadn't seen anyone filming. He never played for attention. Just for her. Emma. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. He turned. It was Clara. For the first time, she wasn't dressed in a crisp blazer or heels, just a coat and a cup of coffee in hand, her hair slightly tousled from the wind, and something softer in her eyes. "I heard the internet loves you," she said dryly. Noah chuckled. "It's been a weird day." "You okay?" I guess he shrugged. "I didn't sign up to be a symbol." She nodded. "That's usually how symbols work. They choose you." He met her eyes. "Am I in trouble?" Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "No, You're the only person in this building who's not pretending." He blinked. "That's a low bar. But you raised it." She set her coffee down on the counter. "You reminded people why we started this company in the first place. Not to make money, not to impress investors, but to matter." Noah didn't know what to say to that. Clara picked up her cup again and walked toward the door. She paused just before leaving. "Keep playing, Mr. Hale." Then she added almost as an afterthought, "I'll be listening." And with that she disappeared into the hallway, leaving only the faint scent of coffee and something warmer lingering behind. The building was still humming from the aftermath of the viral storm. PR had spun it into gold of course hashtags, graphics, community values, campaigns. But inside Clara Monroe's office there was no spin, just silence, and a printer. It whirred quietly in the corner, spitting out a single-page memo, an old policy dug up from the archives buried deep in the internal system. Most executives had forgotten it even existed. Clara hadn't. Memo 14B, Community Engagement, Exception. Clause: Approved non-disruptive charitable acts by employees when performed off the clock and on personal initiative shall not be considered a violation of company policy. The language was dusty, legal, dry, but it was enough. Clara picked up the printed sheet and walked it to her desk. No logo, no note, no signature, just a quiet shield, a layer of protection. She folded it once cleanly and slipped it into a plain envelope. On the front she wrote, "To Mr. Hale." That was all, no return address. No expectation of thanks, only the satisfaction of doing something right. Noah found the envelope 2 days later tucked in his locker at the back of the custodial hallway. He opened it slowly, uncertain. His name. No sender. When he pulled out the memo and read the first few lines, something in his chest tightened. He flipped it over. Blank. He knew. There was only one person who would have gone this route. Only one person who had both the authority and the quiet empathy to handle it like this. He ran his thumb across the crease in the paper, then folded it back carefully and returned it to the envelope. He placed it inside the front pocket of his guitar case, tucked beneath the shoulder strap where it wouldn't get crumpled. He didn't tell anyone, didn't brag, didn't question. Instead, that night after work he sat in the dim staff lounge, guitar in hand, and began writing something new. It started slow, not sad, but still. A melody that moved gently like someone walking home alone in winter, hands deep in pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. Then, without warning, a chord shift a breath of light. Not a resolution. Not yet. But the idea of one. Hope. He didn't name it that night. He played it over and over until the notes felt like skin. Until every pause between chords spoke as loudly as the strings themselves. And then, with Lily curled asleep on the couch beside him, shoes still on one crayon clutched in her hand, Noah whispered the title to the empty room. Silent, thanks. A few days later, Clara walked the halls of the 22nd floor returning from a marketing review. She usually took the private elevator, but today she needed air movement. Something real. As she passed one of the wide cross-hall corridors on her way to the main stairs, a sound caught her attention. Music. Soft. Unassuming. Coming from the side lounge near the break area, the one with the half-broken vending machine and the lopsided couch no one sat on anymore. She paused, listening. The melody was unfamiliar, but it pulled at her. There was no flourish, no showmanship, just clean, aching simplicity. She followed it. Rounding the corner, she saw him. Noah sat on a stool near the window, back to her, unaware of her presence. His guitar rested lightly on his leg fingers, moving with gentle certainty. The room was empty, otherwise lit only by the afternoon sun spilling through the blinds in golden streaks across the tile. His shadow curved long across the floor. Clara didn't speak. She just stood in the doorway, transfixed. The music wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It filled the room not with sound, but with presence, with feeling. There were no lyrics, no introduction, just a wordless story that unfolded like pages turning in wind. And in the way the notes rose and fell in the pauses in the subtle tug between major and minor, she heard it. Recognition. Gratitude. Her. When the final chord faded, Clara stepped back before he could notice. Her heart beat too fast, though she wasn't sure why. She told herself it was coincidence. But she knew the song was a reply. A conversation in melody. That night, she sat in her office with the lights dimmed, the skyline glittering outside. In her inbox were reports, contracts, performance charts. But she didn't open any of them. Instead, she pulled open the bottom drawer of her desk and took out a small box she hadn't touched in years. Inside was a flash drive. She plugged it into her computer and clicked on the only file inside. A recording. Rough audio. Low hiss in the background. Her husband's voice spoke first, still working on the bridge. You think it's too sentimental? Then piano. A soft progression. Simple haunting. She hadn't listened to this since the week he died. It had hurt too much. Even now it ached like touching a scar that never quite healed. But this time she didn't flinch. She closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. And as she sat there in silence and memory, the two melodies blended. Her husband's unfinished song, and Noah Hale's quiet reply. The next morning she passed Noah in the lobby. He was wiping down the elevator panel earbuds and quietly humming something under his breath. She slowed. He noticed her and pulled one earbud out. "Morning, ma'am." Clara studied him for a moment. "Good morning, Mr. Hale." A pause. Then, with a faint smile, she added, "I heard your piece the other day." His face barely changed, but something in his posture shifted a flicker of awareness. He knew she knew. "Just something I've been working on," he said. "It stayed with me," she replied. And with that, she stepped into the elevator, the doors closing slowly between them. No words of thanks. None needed. Between them now was something deeper than explanation. A language without language. A song beneath the silence. The annual Monroe Foundation Gala was always a spectacle. Held in the opulent East River Pavilion with its glass ceiling and skyline views, it had become a magnet for New York's elite, a convergence of polished ambition and champagne-sweet philanthropy. Every year, Clara Monroe hosted it with measured grace, her presence commanding, and cool, her speeches clipped and flawless. But this year, something felt different. She stood behind the velvet curtain at stage-left clipboard in hand, but her mind wandered. Her assistant rattled off last-minute logistics in hushed tones, celebrity arrivals, VIP seating, changes the media wall rotation schedule. Clara nodded, half listening. Somewhere near the back of the ballroom, tucked at a round table just behind a gold column, Noah Hale sat in a plain navy suit. He'd shaved, pressed his collar, even polished his shoes twice, but he still felt out of place. Lily sat beside him in a simple powder blue dress, her curls pinned back by a silver clip she had borrowed from a friend at school. Her excitement bubbled under the surface, her small hands fidgeting in her lap. "You okay, Dad?" she whispered. Noah exhaled. "Yeah, just never been somewhere with this many chandeliers." She giggled, eyes scanning the glittering room. "I think it's beautiful, and you look great, like someone who belongs here." He smiled. "I'll take that as a compliment." A waiter passed, offering sparkling water, which Lily accepted like it was royal champagne. Noah declined. He wasn't here to sip. He was here because someone had invited him. Someone who hadn't told him why. Earlier that week, Clara had sat in her office rereading the gala program for the third time. The featured performer had backed out due to an emergency. The replacement list was uninspired, overbooked jazz trios, corporate-approved pianists. Her pen tapped against the edge of her desk, the rhythm slow and steady. She thought about the piece she'd heard echoing through the hallway. The hush it carried. The thank you it didn't need to say aloud. She thought of the janitor with the quiet hands. And then she picked up her phone and made a call not to an agent, not to a PR consultant, but to Lily. At the table, Noah glanced toward the stage, then to the seat he hadn't expected to fill. He still didn't know exactly what was going on. Clara's invitation had been brief, handwritten, and dropped into his guitar case during one of his late-night shifts. It had said only, "There's a seat with your name on it this Friday. Bring your best suit and your daughter." C. He had asked no questions, and Clara had offered no explanation. As the room dimmed and lights swept gently over the crowd, Clara stepped onto the stage. A subtle hush fell over the room. She wore a midnight blue gown, understated but unmistakably elegant. A single silver bracelet caught the light with each motion of her hand. "Good evening," she began, voice clear. "Thank you for joining us for this year's Monroe Foundation Gala. Your generosity has brought clean water to villages, books to classrooms, and therapy to children who've forgotten how to smile." A polite wave of applause. But tonight she continued, "I don't want to speak to you about impact metrics or grant expansions. I want to speak about something much quieter and far more powerful." She paused. In a world obsessed with volume, there is a kind of kindness that whispers, one that doesn't seek recognition. It simply shows up. In the crowd, Noah stiffened. Lily looked up at him, eyes wide. Clara looked directly toward the back of the room. Not at him, not exactly, but near enough that he felt it. This past month, she said, I was reminded of that kind of kindness. Not from a press release, not from a headline, but from a moment, a melody, a man. A ripple moved through the guests. The artist we'd originally invited to perform tonight couldn't make it. But I believe what you're about to hear was meant for this room and this moment. She turned slightly. Tonight, we won't be hearing a song with a name, but we will hear one with a heart. Then, with a quiet smile, she gestured toward the shadows at stage right. Noah Hale. Noah froze. For a second, he didn't breathe. Lily squeezed his hand hard. "Go," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "Dad, go." He stood slowly, heart-pounding, and made his way to the front. The room didn't applaud. Not yet. They weren't sure who he was or what he was doing. Just a man in a second-hand suit stepping onto a stage of crystal and gold. He sat on the lone wooden stool that had been placed at center, the light soft and golden on his face. A simple mic waited. No preamble, no introduction. He took a deep breath and began to play. The first few notes were barely audible, a breath a question. Then the melody unfolded, gentle and sincere, like a story told by someone who doesn't speak often but means every word when they do. The ballroom fell silent. Forks paused mid-air. Glasses stilled. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. Noah's fingers moved like they remembered something the rest of him had long forgotten. The room, the pressure, the grandeur, it all melted into the edges. He played for Emma. He played for Rachel. He played for Lily. He played for Anna. And somehow he played for Clara. Silent thanks. That's what the piece had become. A song with no words, yet every phrase said more than sentences ever could. When the final note faded, there was no applause at first, just stillness. And then, as if some invisible thread had snapped, the room erupted. A standing ovation. Not polite, not performative. Real. Clara watched from the side of the stage, hands clasped in front of her. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself feel everything, the joy, the ache, the release. When Noah stood and gave a modest bow, he didn't look out at the crowd. He looked toward the side of the stage where Clara met his eyes. No words passed between them. But she smiled, and he nodded. Some things didn't need to be said. Some things had already been played. When the final chord faded, the room forgot how to breathe. No one moved, no one clapped, not yet. It was as if the sound had left a vacuum, not just in the air but in the chest of every person standing in that grand ballroom. The kind of silence that only follows truth. The kind that honors it. Noah sat with his fingers still resting on the strings, his head slightly bowed. His heart beat steady, but his throat burned. Not from nerves, those had long passed, but from the weight of it, the weight of everything he'd poured into that song. He looked up slowly and scanned the room. Dozens of people in tuxedos and gowns. Power brokers, journalists, investors, strangers. And their stage left, just out of the spotlight, Clara Monroe. Her eyes shimmered not from the light, from memory. She wasn't clapping either. Not yet. She was frozen in place, breath shallow, one hand lightly pressed to her chest as if she were holding something invisible, something fragile together. Because in the soft curve of that melody, she'd heard it. The echo of a piano, of laughter in a kitchen long gone, of her husband hunched over a notebook scribbling lyrics he never finished. It was the song he'd started and never completed, the one he called Unwritten Mercy. And here it was not the same, but not different. A twin born of grief and grace. A quiet reply to a conversation that death had interrupted. Her throat tightened. She didn't wipe the tear that fell. She let it move warm and unapologetic down her cheek. Only when Noah finally stood and gave a modest bow did the spell break. The audience rose. Not in a wave, but in a ripple, quiet and reverent. A standing ovation not for performance but for presence, for truth, for the song that had said what words never could. Outside the ballroom, under the cool breath of evening reporters waited like birds on a wire. Noah exited through a side door, Lily walking beside him holding his hand like she always did when things felt too big. Flashbulbs popped, questions flew. "Mr. Hale, what label are you with? Are you going on tour? Was that an original composition?" Who inspired the song? Noah paused, turned slightly, and said simply, "I'm just a man lucky enough to have a guitar, and a reason to play." And with that, he gave Lily's hand a gentle squeeze and kept walking. Clara watched the scene unfold from the mezzanine balcony behind a curtain. She'd instructed her driver to wait. She needed a moment. More accurately, she needed him. 15 minutes later, she found Noah standing alone at the edge of the terrace outside the ballroom. Lily had gone back inside to find dessert. The city lights blinked behind him, the hum of the Hudson River somewhere below. "You always slip away this fast?" she asked. Noah turned, recognizing her voice instantly. "I'm more comfortable with quiet exits." I noticed, she said, stepping beside him. They stood like that for a moment. Still. Calm. Then Clara broke the silence. That melody. He waited. "My husband started writing something like it. Years ago. Before he got sick. Before everything." Her voice cracked slightly. "He never finished it. But when you played, it was like... it came back. Not as he left it, but as it wanted to be." Noah looked down, then met her gaze. "I didn't know," he said softly, "but maybe the music did." Clara smiled at that, a quiet, broken thing. Maybe it did. She pulled a folded card from her clutch and handed it to him. "I don't usually do this," she said, "but I'd like to have dinner. With you." He blinked. She added quickly, "No suits, no stage, no press, just a table, 2 people, maybe some music." He opened the card. It was handwritten. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m. The Finch Room, private dining space, piano included." Noah chuckled. "Do I bring my guitar?" "Only if you want me to stay past dessert." He smiled, and for the first time that night it wasn't tinged with hesitation. "All right," he said. "Dinner it is." The Finch Room was tucked behind a quiet brick corner near the Upper West Side. No signage, just a door with a brass handle that clicked like a whisper when pushed. The next evening, Clara arrived first. She wore no jewelry. No staff trailed her. No photographers lurked nearby. Just a woman with a past meeting, a man who had helped her remember she still had a present. Noah arrived on time. Guitar case slung casually over one shoulder, dressed in a dark sweater and clean jeans. The host seated them near the fireplace. Candles flickered between them. They didn't dive into big questions. Instead, they talked about Lily's art projects, About Clara's college days sneaking into jazz bars with a fake ID. About the first song Noah ever wrote a disaster involving a cat and a ukulele. When dessert came, Clara stood and walked toward the small upright piano near the wall. She opened the lid, touched a single key. "Will you play something?" Noah hesitated, then nodded. He sat beside her on the bench and opened his guitar case. "This one," he said, "has no title yet." He started slow. Clara added chords on the piano, shy at first, then bolder. 2 melodies, hesitant at first, then trusting. A duet between healing and hope. When the last note settled into the wooden floors, Clara leaned back and whispered, "Maybe we don't need a name for it." Noah turned to her. "Why?" "Because some things," she said, "are meant to be heard, not labeled." He nodded. "Then I'll just call it what it feels like." "And what's that?" He looked at her, not the CEO, not the woman in the headlines. Just her. The song beneath the silence. And for the first time in years, Clara didn't feel like something was missing. She felt full. Of music, of presence, of possibility. The night air was velvet, soft, warm, and humming with the kind of quiet that only came when a city finally exhaled. Clara leaned against the wrought iron railing of the rooftop garden above the Finch Room Arms, folded glass of untouched wine in hand. Below them, Manhattan twinkled like a scattered symphony, unorganized, imperfect, alive. Noah stood beside her guitar case, resting on a bench behind them, his fingers brushing the stone ledge as if feeling its rhythm. Neither spoke for a while. They didn't need to. After the music, after the laughter, after the candlelight duet, this silence felt earned. But then, slowly, Clara drew in a breath. "You know," she said softly, "I used to believe my heart had 2 temperatures on fire or frozen solid." Noah turned, watching her. "When my husband died," she continued, "I chose the second. It was easier to stay cold, numb, focused, easier to rebuild an empire than rebuild myself." He didn't interrupt. She looked out across the skyline. "People think when you're grieving you cry a lot, but no one talks about the other side of it. The hardening, the frost that creeps in and never leaves." Noah nodded slowly, the kind that makes applause sound like glass breaking. Clara turned to him. "What do you mean?" Noah's eyes lingered on the horizon. "The last time I heard clapping," he said, voice low, "it was at my wife's memorial. Her students gave her a standing ovation after a slideshow. I was holding Lily in one arm, a folded program in the other." His throat tightened. "I remember thinking it was wrong," he went on. "That sound. Joyful, loud, crashing through grief like it belonged there. I hated it. For years I avoided stages, avoided crowds, because I thought if they clap again, it'll undo me." He laughed faintly. "Tonight was the first time I didn't flinch." Clara's voice was nearly a whisper. "Because of Lily," Noah shook his head gently. "Because of you." She blinked. But before she could speak, he added, "Because someone gave the silence permission to hold space again." "You didn't ask me to perform. You listened." Another pause. Then Clara said, "I wasn't ready for what your music brought up in me." "Noah, I wasn't ready either. I hadn't cried over him in years. I thought that meant I was over it." Maybe Noah said softly, "You were just surviving." Their eyes met, steady, open. No fireworks, no swelling violins. Just a quiet understanding that what they'd lived through had not broken them, only reshaped them. Noah took a breath and glanced back toward the bench where his guitar sat. "Lily asked me yesterday what healing sounds like," he said. Clara smiled faintly. "And what did you say?" He chuckled. "I told her, sometimes healing sounds like nothing at all. Just space. Breathing. The absence of noise where grief used to scream." He looked back at Clara. "And sometimes it sounds like a piano. Playing along." Her hand found the railing again, fingers curling slightly, brushing his. A silence settled between them again, this time charged not with distance but with closeness. Neither moved to label it. Neither dared to. Later that week, Clara sat alone in her office, a legal pad open before her. The top of the page read, "Lily and Emma Fund Draft Vision Statement." Below it, her handwriting flowed with quiet conviction. A scholarship for children of loss. For music that was almost never written. For dreams whispered in the dark. For Lily. For Emma. For every song that almost didn't survive. She called in her assistant, handed over the document, and said only, "Full endowment. We launch next quarter." Quietly at first, let the story speak. Her assistant nodded but paused at the doorway. The name? Lily and Emma. Is that yes? Clara said simply, gaze steady. It is. That Friday, Clara met Noah and Lily outside a music store on Amsterdam Avenue. Lily held a bag with new sheet music inside and a second-hand violin they'd found in the back, worn but full of stories. "Guess what?" Lily said as soon as she saw Clara. "Dad let me pick a name for the scholarship." Clara raised an eyebrow at Noah, who looked sheepish. She was very persuasive. Lily grinned proudly. "I picked the Lily and Emma Fund. 'Cause it's got my name and the mom I don't remember, but I know I love." Clara knelt heart-thudding. "That's a beautiful choice." Lily leaned in and hugged her. "Miss Clara, do you ever think music is where the people we miss go when they can't talk to us anymore?" Clara swallowed. Hard. I think she said gently that music is what they leave behind when they still want to be heard. Lily nodded like she understood completely. That evening, after Noah tucked Lily into bed and kissed her forehead, he returned to the small table in the corner of his apartment, the one where he wrote music when the world was asleep. On the table sat a card. No signature, just a single quote in Clara's handwriting. "Only when the heart is quiet can we hear the voices of those we've lost." He picked up his pencil and began to write. No chords, no lyrics. Just notes that had waited a long, long time to be played. Notes written not to impress or to perform, but to remember, and to say, "I'm still listening." The grand atrium of the Monroe Foundation shimmered under soft gold lighting. Sunlight filtered through the arched skylights bouncing off crystal displays and polished marble floors. Rows of white chairs fanned out from the stage like petals, each one filled with press donors, community leaders, and dozens of children in school uniforms, legs swinging nervously, eyes wide with curiosity. At the front, a sleek podium stood beneath a simple sign, "The Song Beneath the Silence," a new chapter in music education. Clara Monroe adjusted the mic with practiced calm. Her hair was swept back her blazer crisp, but her eyes held something softer today. Not the sharp gleam of corporate command, but something warmer. Open. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Today we launch something deeply personal, not just for me but for anyone who's ever needed music to say what words couldn't." She paused. This fund was born not in a boardroom, but in a moment of silence, the kind that speaks louder than applause. We've named it "The Song Beneath the Silence," because sometimes the most powerful notes are the ones no one hears, until someone listens. Her eyes drifted toward the front row where Noah Hale sat beside his daughter Lily. She gave a small nod. He returned it. Clara stepped back. "And now I'd like to introduce someone who reminded me that music isn't about prestige. It's about presence, about healing, about hope." She turned toward him. Noah. The applause was polite at first, curious. A few confused glances rippled through the room, some recognizing the man in the gray jacket not from galas or panels but from the maintenance halls of the Monroe building. Noah walked slowly toward the podium. No guitar, no note cards, just him. He took a breath, steadying himself as he looked out over the crowd. The silence was thick, expectant. Then he spoke. "I used to believe my life had already played its last song." His voice was quiet, but it carried. "I had a good run, a wife who lit up rooms, a daughter with laughter bigger than her lungs, and a job where I could use my mind. Then life happened. My wife passed. My job vanished with a corporate merger, and I found myself holding a mop in one hand and a little girl's backpack in the other, wondering what part of me was still worth showing the world. The room stilled. I never thought I'd stand behind a podium again, he continued. Not after everything. Not after the doors that closed. But then something strange happened. He glanced at Clara just briefly. I started playing music again. Quietly. On sidewalks. In hospital waiting rooms. At night when Lily was asleep. And I realized, maybe what I thought I had lost wasn't gone. Maybe it was waiting. For the right place. For the right reason. He exhaled. Sometimes the things we lose are the very things that lead us to where we're supposed to be. A hush fell over the audience. No scribbling pens, no clicks of cameras, only breathing. Then applause. It began hesitantly, then grew. By the time Noah stepped down, the entire atrium stood. Lily beamed, clapping like her hands might fly away. Clara didn't clap. She placed a hand on her heart instead. After the ceremony, the media swarmed. Clara fielded questions about the fund, its reach, its mission. A journalist asked what inspired the name Ms. Monroe. Clara smiled. A street performance, a child's drawing. A man who thought no one was listening but played anyway. Another asked Mr. Hale, "Will you be involved in the fund moving forward?" Noah chuckled. "I'll be wherever they need me, even if it's just tuning the kids' guitars." Laughter warmed the room, but it wasn't just laughter anymore. It was respect, recognition. That night, back at their small apartment, Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing with fierce focus. Noah peeked over her shoulder. "What are you working on?" She turned the page toward him. It showed a big stage with a little girl holding a violin. A crowd of happy stick people clapped, and in the corner a man with a beard and guitar stood with a woman in a blazer. A heart floated between them. Lily tapped it proudly. "That's you and Miss Clara." Noah smiled, quietly touched. "She's not Miss Clara anymore. Remember?" Lily grinned. "Right, Clara." She leaned in and whispered, "Are you going to ask her out now?" Noah choked on a laugh. "What you like," her Lily said plainly. "And she listens when you talk. And she makes your eyes smile." Noah looked away, then back. "Maybe one day," he said. "But for now, I think she and I are still listening to the same song." Back at her penthouse, Clara set her heels beside the door, poured herself a cup of chamomile tea, and pulled out an old leather-bound music book from her late husband's shelf. She turned to the final page blank and slowly wrote, "The melody continues, just in a different key." Then she looked at her phone. One new message from Noah. "Thank you for letting silence become music again." She didn't reply right away. She just closed her eyes and smiled. The world had quietly turned a full year. Outside the community center on 5th and Holloway Spring announced its return with gentle winds and stubborn tulips pushing through the concrete edges of the sidewalk. The once gray brick building now bloomed with hand-painted murals, notes, birds, small hands holding instruments, each a signature left behind by children who had come through its doors with nothing but hope and a song in their hearts. Inside, the old corporate lobby had been transformed. The marble reception desk was replaced by cubbies of small violins. The walls, once lined with awards and quarterly growth charts, now wore crayon drawings, treble clefs, and quotes from composers. And in the center of it all stood a bright blue banner that read, "The Song Beneath the Silence, Youth Music Fellowship Center." Near the east corridor, muffled melodies escaped from behind classroom doors, awkward scales out of tune chords, and laughter. And in room 3B, a 9-year-old girl with messy pigtails and the sharpest ear in the building tapped her foot as she coached a classmate through a tricky rhythm. Again, Lily set her voice patient but firm. "Don't count with your mouth, count with your chest, like my dad taught me." Across the hallway, watching through the small window in the door, Noah stood with both hands in his pockets. He wasn't wearing his janitor's jacket anymore today. It was a clean navy shirt with sleeves rolled just below the elbow and a quiet smile on his face. He didn't need to say anything. He just watched. His daughter, her rhythm, her light. Behind him, footsteps. Soft ones. Noah didn't turn right away. He didn't need to. He felt the presence before he saw her. Clara. No longer in stilettos. No longer in high-rise armor. Today she wore a linen shirt smudged with finger paint, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. In her hand was a chipped mug that read, "Music is what feelings sound like." He looked over his shoulder. She smiled. "No board meetings today," he teased gently. She shrugged. "They still happen, but not in skyscrapers. Now it's folding chairs and string budgets." He nodded, eyes flicking back to Lily. "She's got command," Clara said, following his gaze. "She's got your tempo." Noah chuckled softly. "She's got her own. I'm just trying to keep up." They stood there in the hallway for a moment, shoulder to shoulder, listening to the syncopated laughter through the walls. "You know," Clara said, her voice low, "a year ago, I would have walked past this hallway without seeing any of it. I would have been on my way to some investor brunch wondering why the Wi-Fi was slow." Noah looked at her. She continued, but then a janitor played a song that stopped time, and suddenly I started noticing the sounds I used to walk right through. Their eyes met. No rush, no declarations. Just understanding. "And Emma?" he asked. "She's better. Her scans came back clear last month. She's been hiking again. Playing piano." Clara's eyes shimmered, but her smile held. She said music gave her something the medicine couldn't. Noah took that in with a slow breath. "She ever finish that song she started last spring?" Clara nodded. "With Lily's help." That made him smile. "And you?" she asked. He paused. "I started teaching again," he said. "Just part-time. Community night classes, intro to music theory. And I play once a week at the shelter downtown. Sometimes it's not about the audience. Sometimes it's just about being the sound someone needs in that moment." She nodded, then gently touched the window glass where Lily gave a thumbs up to a classmate inside. "They asked me to name this room," Clara said. "I was going to call it Studio C. For Clara. But—" She pointed to the plaque beside the door. Noah leaned closer and read, "Room E, for Emma. For every note that heals." He swallowed. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It's honest," she said. He turned to face her. Really face her now. No barriers, no layers. Clara took a breath. "I spent a lot of years building a tower so high that I forgot how to be close to the ground. But the thing is, you can't hear the whispers of a child's song from the top floor. You have to be here, feet on tile, heart exposed." She reached for the door handle. "Come in." Noah didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked through the window one last time. Lily caught his eye, grinned, and gave him a dramatic wink. Then he reached for Clara's hand. Their fingers met. Not in passion, not in urgency, but in quiet certainty. They didn't need to speak. The music between them was already playing. A melody neither had planned, composed over shared silences, unexpected kindness, and the unspoken spaces between grief and grace. They opened the door together and stepped in, not into a concert hall, but into a beginning. The summer light stretched long across the Manhattan skyline, soft and golden painting, the glass towers with hues of amber and rose. From the rooftop of the Monroe Building, the very heart of Clara's old empire, the city hummed beneath like a distant memory, like applause from a show that had ended long ago. But up here something quieter was beginning. A gentle breeze stirred the corners of a sheet of music clipped to a music stand. Beside it, Noah sat on a weathered bench, his guitar resting against his knee, his fingers moving over the strings with an ease that came not from performance but from presence. Across from him, Clara sat cross-legged barefoot on the rooftop tiles, a pencil tucked behind her ear and a notepad in her lap. She paused, tapping the eraser thoughtfully, then wrote a line and looked up. Lily lay on her stomach on a nearby picnic blanket, drawing doodles in the margins of a lyric sheet. Her crayon-sketched son wore headphones. The clouds had musical notes in them. "You think the bridge works better here?" Clara asked, holding up the page. Noah gave a half-smile. "It's your song, too. You tell me." She lowered the page slightly. "That's still strange to hear." "What is that?" "It's ours. I spent so many years writing for press releases, for contracts, for speeches I didn't believe in. But this," she looked at the notepad, "this feels like truth." Noah strummed a quiet chord. Maybe that's what music is. Truth wrapped in sound. Lily popped up. "Can I read the dedication now?" "Not yet," Clara said, grinning. "We haven't even signed it." "But it's done," Lily insisted, waving the final page dramatically. "We need to give it a name." Noah raised an eyebrow at Clara. "You want to tell her, or should I?" Clara laughed. "Go ahead." He leaned toward Lily. "The name's already there. It's in the last line." She blinked, then slowly turned the sheet over and read the final lyric aloud. And in the silence, "I found you." The words hung in the air, soft as the wind that threaded through Clara's hair. Lily stared at it for a beat longer, then nodded. "That's a good name." She walked to the edge of the rooftop where a small white plaque had just been mounted onto the wall beside a tiny bench that overlooked the skyline. She brushed her fingers across the words etched in silver. This music was born not from fame, not from pain, but from kindness unheard. Her voice was quiet as she read it aloud, and suddenly no one spoke. Not because they didn't want to, but because the moment deserved silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, the kind that listens. Clara stood and walked to Noah sitting beside him on the bench. She rested her hand gently on the edge of the guitar, not to stop him, just to be near. "You remember the first time I heard you play?" she asked. He nodded. "You cried." She smiled. "I didn't know why then. I thought it was grief. But now I think it was recognition." He tilted his head. "I didn't just hear a melody that night," she continued. "I heard a life, a kindness I'd forgotten how to believe in." Noah looked down at the strings, then back at her. "I wasn't playing for anyone that night," he said. "Not the guests, not the board. I was just remembering who I used to be, before the world got loud." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then let's never let it get that loud again," she whispered. Behind them, Lily had begun humming the chorus. She wasn't trying to sing on key, just echoing what she'd heard 100 times. Her voice floated above the rooftop, mingling with the fading warmth of the day. Noah adjusted his guitar and began to play. This time, Clara didn't cry. She sang. Softly at first, just a few bars, enough to carry the words they'd written together. Her voice wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, it was real. And when Noah joined in with harmony and Lily with a tambourine from her backpack, it didn't sound like a rooftop in the middle of a city. It sounded like home. From somewhere below, distant city sounds tried to creep in: a car horn, the whoosh of traffic, a siren far away, but none of it touched them. Here, above the noise, they had created something else. A melody born not from loss, but from rediscovery. As the music rose, the camera of the world, if there had been one, would have slowly pulled back. First revealing the three of them seated close, Clara's hand still lightly resting on Noah's knee. Then panning upward, showing the rooftop transformed not by money, not by fame, but by chalk drawings, sheet music clothes, pinned to rails and a sun-stained bench. Then further still as the city shimmered below like a living painting. And in the center of it all, small, unassuming, but unbreakable three souls, connected by something far quieter than destiny, kindness, and a song. Sometimes, the quietest people carry the most beautiful music inside them, and sometimes all it takes is someone who's willing to stop and listen. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever met someone whose kindness changed your life in an unexpected way? Or maybe you were that quiet melody in someone else's storm. Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every word, and let us know where you're watching from. Whether it's a small town, a big city, or somewhere in between, your presence here matters. If this story gave you even a little hope, consider subscribing for more tales just like this. Stories of redemption, compassion, and second chances. Because in a world that can feel noisy and harsh, we all need a quiet reminder that kindness still exists. Thank you for spending your time with us. We're honored to be part of your day. Until next time. Keep listening and keep believing.